I know this is a study about climate-related disasters, but I've been told that the largest disaster risk for Canada is an earthquake on the West Coast. And that's not necessarily a climate-related risk. But Mr. Stewart, maybe, could you elaborate for us? It's not an unlikely scenario. And are we prepared as a country for it? And if not, what do we need to start doing now to prepare?
Is there a pathway forward that's open and transparent and accountable to the people of Canada to say that, yes, we're going to mitigate these costs, including all the encouragement to homeowners in building in high-risk areas?
This guy's garage. Like and subscribe.
He's resuming its study on protecting Canadian residents from extreme weather.
Thank you. Thank you to the witnesses. Mr. Stewart, are you familiar with the Adapting to Rising Flood Risk report? I found it very interesting in this report that it stated that they estimate, as of 2020 numbers, there's about $3 billion in annual flood risk, and that 34% of that risk is 1% of all properties. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yes. The report essentially says that the top 10% account for about 90% of the risk. So the financial costs of flooding, the financial exposure to flooding, is highly concentrated in that top 10% of Canadians that can't obtain presently adequate flood insurance.
It was pretty shocking to me that 1%, probably over $1 billion now, is just that 1% of properties. This is it starts to make it wonder, is there any insurance policy out there that can mitigate risk when it's 1% of properties having 34% of the risk? Or what are the other options that you think the government should be looking at and working with communities to mitigate this risk?
So, as you've heard, investments in infrastructure, like focusing, if another DMAF program was to be funded, focusing that infrastructure spending on that 1%, on those at highest risk, is going to provide the best return on investment. Where insurers are still playing a role with flood is ensuring the 90% where unpredictable risk is happening. So we were getting these significant rainfall events, such as what happened last summer in southern Ontario and Quebec, as what happened in 2023 in Nova Scotia. These were unpredictable events where there were significant billions of dollars in flood losses. But
I actually toured Grand Forks this summer, and they had a significant flood event a number of years ago. They did receive some DMAF funding, but they actually had to buy out an entire neighborhood because there was no way, even with like $100 million extra, that they could protect that neighborhood. And, people were saying there was a big issue because once this flood happened, the value of those properties dropped by 2/3. And this is people's livelihoods. And so they actually had to come forward and agree to pay the people out something close to what the pre-flood value was of their property. These were mostly low-income people and fixed-income people. Is there a policy that says that maybe we should be moving people out of their communities? Is that the most cost-effective way?
It's the most expensive and most difficult decision to make. It has been made in High River, Alberta. It's been made along the Bow in Calgary. It's been made across the river here in Gatineau.
It's the most expensive, but in this case, they ruled that it was cheaper to do than mitigating. So it's not always the most expensive, is it?
It's the most politically difficult because you're disrupting people and they don't want to necessarily move. In Calgary, where the offer was made and it was voluntary, I think along the Elbow Park part of Calgary, I think about 1 in 3 households decided to move, and that was right after they'd been flooded. The others decided that they wanted to stay. So
I'm going to go to your insurance friends here. If there were to be a national flood insurance program, based on this report that I was citing, it was saying that a mandatory opt-in would probably be the best way to ensure that they had the widest coverage. But I've been told that a federal government mandating mandatory opt-in infringes on provincial responsibility. Can you elaborate on that issue?
I think this underscores the need to have a nationally led dialogue, because where we've seen challenges in implementation so far is in part around interjurisdictional authority and responsibilities. So a federal-led discussion is key. We do need all stakeholders at the table to continue to drive the best form of implementation. Certainly for insurers, this is something we've been advocating for a very long time. My colleague Craig Stewart, in his former role on behalf of IBC, was leading that discussion. The position that we've certainly taken as an insurer, as I think others have taken, is we will work with government to establish the right framework for Canadians.
Confirm, though, there is a provincial issue with mandatory opt-in? Like, is that a provincial responsibility?
I can't comment specifically on that.
I'll move on to my final minute and a half of questioning. I know this is a study about climate-related disasters, but I've been told that the largest disaster risk for Canada is an earthquake on the West Coast. And that's not necessarily a climate-related risk. But Mr. Stewart, maybe, could you elaborate for us? It's not an unlikely scenario. And are we prepared as a country for it? And if not, what do we need to start doing now to prepare?
So this is the issue that keeps insurance executives up at night more than any other is the possibility of a Cascadia subduction earthquake after the 2011 earthquake that happened off the coast of Japan, which was far greater than any modeling had predicted. That it was a 9.0. There was an analysis done globally on where else such big earthquakes could happen, and unfortunately, off the coast of BC is one of those zones. And it is difficult to imagine the extent, essentially, the continental shelf that would basically drop 6 feet. So Delta BC would be underwater. You would basically have the ocean just flood roll in. And so this is in the words of a previous OSFI superintendent, this is an event that will happen. We just don't know when. And
very soon.
It could happen soon. The last significant quake, the periodicity of these quakes over time is about one every 500 years. The last one was 300 years ago. So that's the event that we worry about the most.
Thank you very much.
Any suggestions on what the federal government could do aside of a convening role, or maybe like a strategy that has no teeth, around actually enabling buyout programs for very at-risk homes and neighborhoods? In Nova Scotia, there's one along the Bedford Basin. It floods up the staircases of the basements fairly regularly. We were hoping that the province would enable a buyout program where the city actually took over the land, made it a park, a public space, using federal available dollars, but they didn't want to do that. So any suggestions on a path forward for that type of kind of between a rock and a hard place? Maybe Mr. Stewart to start?
It's a very difficult question. Public Safety Canada analyzed it extensively in the course of preparing that report. There are good examples across the country. The best example is province of Quebec, where they did introduce a buyout program. Unfortunately, the price of the buyout was about $200,000 on average, which was too low to entice people to accept it. Where Public Safety Canada landed was the best timing to do it is after an event. Instead of rebuilding, that's when you try to offer people money so that they don't rebuild in harm's way. But it's difficult to get people to leave unless you somehow make it a mandatory buyout program, which is sometimes politically very difficult. So there's lots of great experience across the country from these buyout programs. You can learn from High Rivers, the one that's held up as in Alberta is probably the most successful. But at least putting the framework in place, the SORM discussions with the provinces on this topic are well along. Like they have discussed it. It's not new, and so there is a foundation to build upon.
I think it was Mr. Leibl and Mr. Bacuna that put it best. We need a whole of society approach. And just looking at this list, I mean, we're talking about individual responsibility, health vulnerability, zoning. You're talking about provincial alignment across all the ministries, mining, forestry. We're talking about relocation issues. We're talking about the devaluation of properties. We're talking the cost to the taxpayer, whether we're talking about a failed model in the United States or the DFA program in Canada, which could be offset by the topic that we're talking about here today. But we haven't even begun to talk about the larger range of issues that have to fall under this umbrella. We're not talking about the transboundary agreement, for example, that caused the flooding in Abbotsford. We're not talking about dams and their role in managing floods. And not just your round of panels discussion, but the panel before you emphasized that this work is already done. It's already documented extensively over the last 10 years. All we need now is government action. But to Mr. Leibl, I suppose, where would this government provide its best effort in kickstarting this process, which covers a lot of different sectors?
I appreciate you've laid out the business case for government investment and leadership in this area more eloquently than I could. And as a leader who has held previous roles prior to joining this table or this House, you would know well that it's smaller municipalities and local leaders that are often on the front lines of this issue. They're closest to their constituents. They are the ones who see at a ground level the impacts on families, often people that they know, members of their community, their neighbors. And it's also these same communities where leaders have the fewest resources. The infrastructure simply isn't there. Canada is fortunate, in my view, that we have had such strong ambassadorship and local leadership from municipalities. And part of the reason is because they are on the front lines of this issue and they're hearing it from their residents. But you laid out a clear business case for the need for a coordinated national response. In my view, there's areas of this that do not need to be over-orchestrated. What we're seeing, at least in the insurance sector, and these are very early days because the nature of the threat is evolving so quickly, but climate resilience or severe weather resilience is also emerging as a bit of a competitive space within the insurance industry. And this is very positive, and there's opportunity here for real innovation. Government could, for example, create something of an innovation fund that might incentivize insurers to put more of their own money, provided there was some government partnership. In this sense, perhaps there's opportunities to leverage private partner opportunities, private-public opportunities rather, without the need for the level of coordination that you've rightly described to truly have a coordinated national response. But that is a very steep hill to climb. We must do that work, but where are the opportunities along the way? Because we need those too, and the experiences from this past summer and in recent years shows us the time for action and mitigation is clearly now. Canadians need it.
I thank you very much. And it has been cited that the USA model is actually failing, mainly because it's over budget and it doesn't cover all the costs coming from extreme weather events. But Canada's got the DFA, and we're talking around the issue of trying to mitigate that cost, or maybe building on the DFA. But in this case, we're talking about a partnership with the private sector, which is the insurance sector. Is there a pathway forward that's open and transparent and accountable to the people of Canada to say that, yes, we're going to mitigate these costs, including all the encouragement to homeowners in building in high-risk areas? Mr. Leibl.
Thank you for the question. I think that partnership is essential. Canadians look to their insurance companies rightly to protect them, but when climate risk becomes a near certainty, it's no longer a risk but almost a certain event. The role of insurers there is very limited, and that's not how the insurance system was designed. So for Canadians to have adequate protection, there needs to be that partnership between insurers and government. We've started down that road. We're certainly very open to it, and I think I speak on behalf of the industry. We're always willing to come to the table because these discussions are essential.
You have stronger home and eco-friendly coverage that are available to policyholders. I don't know how prevalent that is in the industry, but I'd like to give you a chance to tell us about that.
Appreciate very much your familiarity with some of our insurance products. So we do have two optional coverages available right now that we price on a cost recovery basis. The intent being that we want as many Canadians, our members, to avail themselves of these optional coverages as possible. Essentially, the way that the Build Back Better provision works is if you were to encounter a loss as part of your claim settlement for no more cost to you as the policyholder or the member, that we would build to a higher resilience standard. So if a significant event were to happen again, you'd be better protected. We have more broadly, beyond just Wawanesa Insurance now, there is an ongoing shift to within the insurance industry, and it's a necessary one, shifting from that protective, reactive posture to more of a preventative one. And that is a change, and that takes a lot of public education. In my view, it's very fair for Canadians if they were to say now, why do I need to be invested in these prevention efforts? You're their insurance company. You should be there for me. And that historically has been the absolute value proposition. And today it is. For any of our members who suffer a loss, we will be there for them. And that's why we're in business as a mutual company. We take those responsibilities very seriously. Could uptake around these products be stronger? Yes. And I don't think we're alone as an insurer in having that experience. What you're seeing now is increasingly some insurers bundling some of these coverages into their base wordings. In other words, part of their core product suite. This is something that's evolving very quickly in real time. But here again, there's also a risk that insurers are taking on disproportionate risk. And this is happening in the absence of a broader national conversation around these needs. So again, we'll try and do our part, but I think we need the federal government to join us.